It is now time for us to move on with some of the top business news headlines of the day with our business editor, Stephen Carroll. Good morning, Stephen.
Hello, Catherine.
And you're going to be starting us off with the markets, which had a bit of a rough day on Monday. Any better today?
Not much by the looks of things. We saw volatility on stock markets at a 4-month high yesterday over fears of Britain potentially leaving the European Union. The European markets opening down again today. You can see Paris down by over 1%, falls 2 in London and in Frankfurt. Not quite of the same scale that we had been seeing 24 hours ago, though. Oil and gas shares and mining companies among the biggest fallers across Europe. In Asia, there were more falls on Japan's Nikkei. It was 3.5% down yesterday, down 1% against today. 1% against today, that being driven, wherever I'm going with this, driven indeed by a strengthening of the yen, which is hurting exporters in Japan. And speaking of currencies, let's also check on the value of the pound today. Of course, that's been very vulnerable to changes as we've been getting more polls in the Brexit referendum. The pound down almost 1% against the dollar again today. £1 trading for just over $1.41.
Indeed, and we have heard in the last hour or so that bookmakers' odds have shortened on Britain leaving the European Union next week. So more volatility potentially on the way, I think. Here in France, though, today, unions are calling for another day of strike action, also accompanied by protests. Of course, we've seen this over many days and weeks recently. There's going to be quite a big impact on normal life today, though, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. Let's start, first of all, with the train network. Things actually improving, would you believe it, on the train strike today after 13 days of action. The French train operator, the SNCF, hoping to run 90% of its high-speed TGV trains, as well as between 60 and 70% of regional and suburban services. Here in Paris, the metro is still running as normal, but crucially for football fans, there will be an improved service on the RER B line that goes to the Stade de France, with about 80% of trains running. Around a third of train drivers are on strike over changes to their working conditions.
Just in time for there to be no match at the Stade de France today, but there we go. There's also a protest by taxi drivers, though.
Yes, that's right, and that could affect other Euro 2016 fixtures. 7 different federations representing taxi drivers calling for protests over the labour law reforms, but also against competition from services like Uber. Now, they threatened to block not only the ring road here in Paris, but also access to stadiums where games are being held. We're yet to see any effect, though, from that disruption.
All right, so what about the skies, though? We've been talking about Air France, haven't we? The pilots there still not very happy with proposed changes to their jobs.
No, indeed, and today is the final of a 4-day strike by pilots at Air France. The airline says that 80% of flights will still operate today. Just over a quarter of pilots taking part in the action. It's over a dispute with management over pay. Now, Air France is part of an airline group with the Dutch carrier KLM. Staff there accepted a pay freeze and longer working hours in a restructuring deal last year, part of plans to help the group return to profit. They're now worried that action at Air France could put their jobs in danger. Catherine Viette reports.
The wave of blue planes never stops at Amsterdam's airport. At KLM, the last strike was back in 1995. It's a different story with Air France in Paris, and their Dutch colleagues are less than impressed.
I think that the French are striking very, very often. And a few years ago we got into trouble, so I don't think it's a good thing.
2014 a strike, now a strike, so maybe the clients start thinking Air France, KLM, is it the best company to book for? Maybe that's a reputation blame, yeah.
If KLM pilots are criticizing their French counterparts now, it's because last year they agreed to make several major concessions.
We accepted a CLA deal with the company on increasing productivity of the pilots, like 8 to 9% in work and rest time regulations. We raised the retirement age from 56 to 58, and we accepted a zero pay raise until the end of 2017.
These changes have lowered KLM's expenses and raised revenues. For the Dutch employees, it's out of the question to let yet more strikes ruin their hard work. They've launched an online petition targeting Air France pilots.
We ask you not to strike, and we ask the managers and the pilots to talk with each other.
Air France's CEO said the 4-day strike over pay cuts would cost the airline about €5 million each day. But that's a drop in the bucket compared to the 2-week walkout back in 2014 That cost the group nearly 500 million euros.
Right, lots of disruption coming out through the day with all of those strikes. Thank you so much for running us through all of those details. Stephen, back later on with more business news for you.